of Josip Bartomeu, Barcelona amassed debts of more than €1 billion, and when the pandemic hit,
This
few
guy
clubs were more ruthlessly
ruined us,
exposed.
man.
In the 2019-20 season, Barcelona lost 8-2 against Bayern Munich in the quarter-final of the Champions League, while falling to second place in La Liga. The following year, they were thrashed by PSG in the round of 16 and fell to third place in the league.
Thrashed?
In the 2021-22 and 2022-23 seasons, Barca didn't even make it out to the Champions League group stage, something which would have seemed unthinkable such a short while ago. From winning 4 La Liga titles in 5 years between 2014-15 and 2018-19, Barcelona have won just 1 La Liga title in the last 5 years. Their crippling debt and financial woes saw them lose their greatest player of all time for nothing, and to make matters worse, Barca's downfall has coincided with their El Clasico rivals Real Madrid enjoying an astonishing run of 6 Champions League crowns, which is more than Barca have won in total, in just 10 seasons. Last season, Barcelona finished 10 points behind title winners Real Madrid, and only 4 above their Catalan neighbour Girona in La Liga. And over the summer, Real Madrid added arguably the best player on the planet on a free transfer, and the most promising young player in South America, to a squad which already contained the likes of Bellingham, Vinny Jr., Rodrigo, Eduardo Camavinga, Aurelien Tchouameni and co, in what looks to be a super team built for the next decade. Barca, by contrast, with a lot of ground to make up and well-documented financial issues, had to replace the outgoing Xavi in the dugout. They were forced to let Ilkay Gundogan rejoin Man City free of charge, and they only brought in Dani Olmo, Pau Victor, and a 34-year-old Wojciech Szczesny, who came out of retirement after Marc-Andre ter Stegen suffered a long-term injury setback. The narrative coming into this season, therefore, was that Real Madrid were a well-oiled machine, perfectly poised for an entire generation
the
by the wily old puppet master Florentino Perez, who had orchestrated a masterclass in squad building, whereas Barcelona were still a bit of a clown car, bumbling between crises, and only remaining remotely competitive by a resurgence of La Masia graduates. And yet, almost a third of the way through this season, Barcelona have only dropped 3 points in La Liga, already enjoying a 6-point lead at the top of the division, and they have battered both their ultimate bogey team Bayern Munich 4-1 and their El Clasico rivals Real Madrid 4-0 in their own backyard in the last week alone. On current form, in terms of performances, underlying data, and, most importantly of all, actual results, Barcelona are the best team in Europe. And if you take 17-year-old sensation Lamine Yamal for it, they are the best team.
What is that again?
But how did such a seemingly sudden and narrative-defying transformation happen? Is it the club fell way off the pace
if we won against... If it wasn't for Araujo,
were marred by petty internal disputes and grievances with the local media,
I think it would have been an El Clasico final.
12 months. It was difficult, therefore, throughout the last 2.5 years, to properly gauge both how good or bad Barcelona were, and how good or bad Xavi was as a head coach, given that his only other managerial experience was 18 months in Qatar with Al Sadd. Hansi Flick is much more experienced. He masterminded a treble-winning season at Bayern Munich, which included that famous 8-2 win against Barcelona, but his appointment was still seen as a major gamble by Barca president Joan Laporta. Flick's time at Bayern was brilliant but brief, spanning just 18 months, and in his only job since then, he had a miserable 2 years managing the German national team, where he went out in the group stage of the 2022 World Cup, and was sacked following a 4-1 defeat at home against Japan, which was Germany's 4th defeat in a 5-year run, as they looked to turn their fortunes around ahead of hosting Euro 2024. Germany's upturn in form following Julian Nagelsmann's appointment also didn't paint Flick in a particularly positive light. And in the fact that Flick speaks neither Spanish nor Catalan, has never worked outside of Germany before, and his style of play doesn't exactly align with the philosophy that is so deeply ingrained at Barcelona, and you can see why Flick's arrival divided opinion. Just as he did at Bayern, though, where he replaced the struggling Niko Kovac mid-season, Flick has had an immediate impact at Barcelona. The Barcelona job is often described as being the most difficult in club football. Not since Johan Cruyff, who landed the Barca job over 36 years ago, has a manager lasted more than 5 years at the Camp Nou. Even Pep Guardiola, who enjoyed immense success and was almost universally acclaimed, stepped down after 4 years and had to take a year-long sabbatical after managing his boyhood club, so intense and demanding was his experience. Hansi Flick is Barcelona's 9th manager since Guardiola left the club 12 years ago. Discussing the emotional toll of managing Barca last January, the current incumbent Xavi stated, quote, "It is cruel and unpleasant. They make you feel you are worthless every day. Pep told me, Valverde told me, I saw Luis Enrique suffer. We have a problem in terms of demands. You don't enjoy it, you put your life on the line at every match.
The thing with Xavi was always complaining, man.
Throughout his final season, it was evident that those demands had begun to weigh too heavily on Xavi, and that it was that, more so than anything that was happening on the pitch, that meant that he was unlikely to stay on beyond his 2.5 years there. It is early days, of course, but as of now, Hansi Flick seems to be unmoved by those pressures. Bayern Munich are very similar to Barcelona in that sense. They too are a fan or member-owned juggernaut, where you have to keep club presidents and hierarchies on side. You are expected to win virtually every game playing a certain style of football, and there is a relentless media ecosystem consisting of rabid newspapers and television channels dedicated solely to the club's internal affairs, resulting in A, immense scrutiny and criticism when things aren't going well, and B, a search for things to talk about, no matter how irrelevant, invasive or scandalous, to fill a 24-hour news cycle. Flick has first-hand experience of this kind of madness, therefore, but according to a recent article by Paul Bayus in The Athletic, he has a secret weapon in blocking out what is sometimes referred to as the entorno of Barcelona, and that is the fact that he doesn't speak Spanish or Catalan. Initially cited as a potential problem when Flick was appointed, the thing that everyone remembers about Pep Guardiola's great Barcelona team may be their ball retention, goal scoring, and the genius of Messi, but just as important was their fitness. Despite their size, they were almost never outrun, and their desire to win the ball back, synonymous with Guardiola's 5-second rule. For the uninitiated, Pep's 5-second rule, which he carried with him to Bayern and Man City, mandated that his players make an extremely intense and overwhelming effort to win the ball back for 5 seconds after they lost it, pressing in packs and descending on the ball like a herd of mad 5'5" wolves, before reverting back into their defensive shape if they fail to regain possession within those 5 seconds. Hansi Flick has brought that intensity back to Barca's play. Barcelona are pressing high at the pitch, right from the opposition's goal kicks, with even 36-year-old striker Robert Lewandowski involved in their press, tasked with sitting on the opposition's midfield pivots and preventing them from being able to dictate possession. Barcelona's wingers, meanwhile, typically Rafinha and Lamine Yamal this season, push right up onto the fullbacks, often higher up the pitch out of possession than Lewandowski as a result, and as Barca press in that shape, most of their opponents have had great difficulty in playing their way out. As a result, Barca have become really effective in picking their pockets in dangerous areas, where they only need one or two passes to manufacture an opportunity on goal. When describing his high press early on during his time at Liverpool, Jurgen Klopp famously stated, quote, "It's only one pass away from a really good opportunity. No playmaker in the world can be as good as a good gegenpressing situation. And that's why it's so important with Lionel Messi at Inter Miami, and Xavi never quite came up with a solution to solve the Busquets-shaped hole in his midfield." Oriol Romeu, a La Masia graduate who returned to the club from Girona and played 37 times last season, wasn't part of Flick's plan and returned to Girona on
Get this bum out of here, man. Damn.
And the absence of Frenkie de Jong, who's only recently returned from a long-term ankle injury, Flick, partly through design and partly through a lack of alternatives, has turned to La Masia.
Hi.
It is like a cheat code for Barca that they seem to have a wellspring of talent to call upon whenever things start to turn against them. And in their current financial plight, it has never been more important. following a few concerns that the La Masia pipeline may just have dried up a bit, as fewer graduates got opportunities under Josip Bartomeu's presidency, and some of the most highly regarded grads, like Ricky Puig, who sold to LA Galaxy in Major League Soccer, and Ansu Fati succumbed to a series of long-term injuries,
Take the number 10 away from this guy,
have
please.
responded in fairly emphatic style. Lamine Yamal became Barcelona's youngest player in over a century at the age of 15 2 seasons
He's basically
ago,
the youngest player to
at
do
age
anything.
17, he is legitimately both there and Spain's main man already, and one of the best players in the world. On pure performance levels, regardless of his age, Yamal ought to be in contention for the 2024 Ballon d'Or. And it is quite frankly frightening to think how good he could become if, as you'd imagine,
I don't know about
he is
that.
still improving. Pau Cubarsí, meanwhile, who is only a few months older than Yamal, looks like the perfect Barcelona centre-back. Also aged 17, Cubarsí already has a real presence about him, almost freakishly so given his tender years. His reading of the game is already tremendous, and he strides out of defence with the ball at his feet like someone who has been in a formal academy setting since the age of 7, and at Barca since he was 11, which he has.
Age of 7?
Cubarsí has so far formed an excellent partnership alongside the vastly experienced Inigo
was I
Martinez,
doing at the age of 7?
who was expected to leave Barcelona in the summer before Flick came in, watched him in pre-season, and decided that he should be part of the club's plans. With over 500 games of professional football under his belt, age 33, and of a very similar stature and profile to Cubarsí, Martinez would appear to be an almost ideal mentor. In midfield, meanwhile, Flick handed 17-year-old sitter Marc Bernal not just a first-team debut, but actually started him in Barcelona's opening game of the season away at Valencia, where he looked incredibly assured in a 2-1 win, retaining his place in the team against Athletic Club and Rayo Vallecano. A giant in midfield at 6'4", and quite possibly still growing given his age, Bernal brought an authoritativeness to the centre of the pitch that you typically associate with someone about 10 years older than him. Sergio Busquets, don't forget, didn't make his La Liga debut until he was 20 years old. Unfortunately, following his impressive start, Bernal
he's for sure 6'4"
at the end of his third consecutive start against Vallecano. It was a devastating setback, and one
Casado, man.
A speedy recovery.
He did
but in
step
his
up
absence,
too.
Flick again turned to La Masia, this time to the slightly more experienced Marc Casado. Casado is 21 years old and has played 67 times for Barcelona B, but he'd only ever made 2 La Liga appearances before the start of this season, and he had never started a La Liga game. Nonetheless, Flick threw him straight in and gave him 90 minutes in Barca's first game of the season against Valencia, and following Bernal's setback, Casado has become a mainstay in midfield alongside Pedri. If you'd have asked me a week or two ago, I'd have said that Casado is a hard-working and versatile player, well-versed in the ways of La Masia, as you'd imagine, helping him to seamlessly transition into first-team football and do a job whenever he's called upon. A bit like Sergio Roberto for a number of years, who was never a job, man.
It's a 9 to 5.
But provided dependable cover at fullback,
I hate it.
Central midfield,
I hate it when someone says,
"Oh, as a result.
He's doing a job."
After watching Barca trounce Bayern and particularly
I don't give a damn if he's doing a job.
Though, where Casado played
it's not a job. He has to stand out.
I might have to revise that assessment. In El Clasico, up against a formidable midfield quartet of Valverde, Bellingham, Tchouaméni and Camavinga, I thought that Casado was possibly the best player on the pitch. His 70 touches were more than anyone in the Madrid midfield.
In the midfield,
he
I'd
assisted
say
Barcelona's
it was
opening goal, and he completed 82% of his 57 attempted passes. They weren't just safe passes, either backwards or sideways either. As well as assisting Barca's first goal,
that's what I like about
completed
Casado.
14 passes into the
passes
final
forward.
third, whereas
He's turning.
Baby, Federico Valverde,
He's turning. He's fluid. He doesn't. It's not side to side, left and right, to the left, to the left, to the right, to the right. No.
Speed in transition, as much
forward,
as his
direct.
energy and positional awareness, that has made Casado an early favourite of Flick's. That is the biggest tactical alteration that Flick has implemented at Barcelona. At a club synonymous with tiki-taka and total football, it wouldn't be fair to say that Flick has discarded that tradition, and he could certainly never say that, but he has certainly complemented it with a healthy dose of German pragmatism and efficiency. Flick's Barca are still capable of lovely, intricate passing moves, but when the opportunity presents itself, they have no hesitation about being more direct, hitting it long, and looking to make runs in behind the opposition. Not only is this effective because Barca have the speed and dynamism of Rafinha and Yamal on either flank, and the late runs of Dani Olmo into the box, and the predatory instincts of Robert Lewandowski already in there, it also means that teams cannot settle against them. Barcelona can hurt you in multiple ways now, not just by playing through you, and the fact that teams have to guard against that means they are having to drop back, for example, in fear of the ball over the top, which in turn creates more space for the likes of Pedri, Casado, Olmo, or the wide players to pick up the ball and turn. In 11 games so far this season, Barcelona have scored 47 goals. That is an average of roughly 3.4 goals per game, compared to just 2 goals a game last season. All of this, it's worth emphasising, has been achieved with significant ongoing injury problems. Alongside Bernal, Eric Garcia, Ferran Torres, Ronald Araujo, Andreas Christensen, and Marc-Andre ter Stegen are all currently sidelined. Meanwhile, Frenkie de Jong only just returned from 6 months out with an ankle injury, and Gavio's cameo appearances off the bench in Barcelona's last 3 games marked his first competitive.
Gavi came on 5 seconds. He came on for 5 seconds. He already got a yellow card.
It's hard to see where all of those players fit in, with Barcelona playing so well at the moment, especially Gavi, who is seemingly too good to leave out, but the same arguably could be said of Dani Olmo, who has undoubtedly helped Robert Lewandowski a huge amount by making him much less isolated.
Elmo and friends.
De Jong, meanwhile, must be watching the performances of Marc Casado and wondering whether he is in danger of becoming a rotation option.
He for sure
in
is.
Barca's 4-0 drubbing of Real Madrid, 6 out of their starting 11 were La Masia graduates, whereas just 1 of Real Madrid's starting 11 came through their.
And let's not forget, Galacticos, second-hand Galacticos, best midfield in the world. Best young midfield in the world, Bellingham, Valverde, Tchouaméni, Camavinga, Modric, let's not forget.
Benefited them, forcing them to look to La Masia once again, which has always provided the building blocks for Barca's best team.
Dunked on
it would be remiss of me, however, not to acknowledge that, as much as I have painted a rosy picture of Flick's Barcelona up to this point, and there is a great deal to be positive about, that turmoil is by no means over. We saw that in the summer, with the forced sale of Ilkay Gundogan to Manchester City on a free transfer.
Elmo and friends.
So the club could register Dani Olmo, and even that was only made possible by
Elmo and friends.
Andreas Christensen, which allowed Barca to allocate those funds towards Olmo as per La Liga regulations. As always in recent years,
Elmo
that
and
was
friends.
only papering over the cracks, and as of midnight, December 31st, 2024, Olmo will officially be unregistered again as things stand. Barcelona are confident that they will find the resources to re-register Olmo, either through their kit manufacturers Nike, who they are currently in negotiations with, external funding relating to their troubled Barca Media or Barca Studios projects, or further player sales. It is a sign, however, of the delicate foundations upon which this tremendous Barcelona team is built, and the long road back to economic normality Barcelona have not yet pulled onto, let alone reached the end of. Returning President Joan Laporta's strategy to deal with Barcelona's debt and funding crisis
he's looking for something to say.
Economic levers, or palancas in Spanish,
he's always looking for something to say, man.
That was enough for Barca to muddle through
the last
seasons while retaining a
semi-competitive
squad.
That man will sell.
Cost-cutting still had to be implemented, but it comes at a
He's a guy who can sell you a pen.
Those levers, or